So this directions video is on this assignment here, the identifying producers and consumers. So there is a food web here, and you may not be familiar with all of the organisms that are in that food web. So I have some pictures here. So we don't have these plants here because obviously this is like an Arctic ecosystem. So that's what liverwort looks like, and then caribou moss, and then you have lichen, which kind of grows on the side of trees. So these are not things we're familiar with. One of the plants there is grasses, and you already know what grass looks like, so I don't have a picture of that. And then for those herbivores, you have pica. If you don't know what a pica looks like, it's a little adorable little rodent thing. And then there's a musk ox, and then this is a caribou, and then these are lemmings, and then this is an Arctic hare, and then the next line up there's an Arctic fox, and then there are brown bears and Arctic wolves, and this is a snowy owl, and then a kittiwake here, and then the one I didn't have a picture of is man, because you know what people look like already. So let's look at this assignment here. So it says list all the producers or autotrophs. So another word for producer or autotroph for the most part is plant. So we're going to list all the plants. So plants are at the very bottom of this food web. And the way you can tell that something is a producer or an autotroph is that there's never any arrows pointing to them. Only arrows pointing away from them. So if we look here at liverwort, the arrow is pointing away from the liverwort, and so liverwort is a producer. The reason the arrow is pointing away is because liverwort doesn't eat anything. It makes its own food. So the arrow is pointing where the energy from the liverwort is going to go, so it points like who is eating whom. So the liverwort is going into the pica. The energy from the liverwort is going to the pica, and so the pica is eating the liverwort. That's what those arrows are showing. So then you also have grasses and caribou moss and lichen, and you can write those there. So these are all the ones at the bottom where there's no arrows pointing to them. And then consumers. Consumers is everything else. So everything that has arrows pointing to it in this entire chart here, that's going to be a consumer. So you're going to list all 12 of them. So not the plants down here, but everything else is a consumer. And then herbivores. So you're looking for things that only eat plants. So starting at the plants, liverwort, so pica is a herbivore. And then grasses goes to pica, which we already have. And then grasses goes to musk ox. And so musk ox is a herbivore. And then grasses also goes to caribou. And so caribou would be a herbivore. And then grasses also goes over here to the brown bear. But the brown bear is not a herbivore because the brown bear also eats lemmings and Arctic hares and picas. So the brown bear is not a herbivore because herbivores only eat plants. So then the grasses goes to lemmings. That's another one here. And then the last one here, lichen, goes to lemmings, which we already have. And then lichen goes to Arctic hares, which is the one we're missing. Alright, find the omnivore. And I know man is omnivore, but not according to this chart because none of these plants go into the man. So not the man, find the other thing that eats both plants and animals and list that here. And then carnivores, so these would be things that eat the herbivores. So picas are eaten by Arctic foxes. They are eaten by Arctic wolves. They are eaten by polar bears. They are eaten by kittiwakes. So you're going to list all of the carnivores that are here. You would not list the brown bear, and so I think there's actually an extra line here, so I don't think you need to use line number 7 because it would be Arctic foxes, Arctic wolves, polar bears, kittiwakes, snowy owls, and man, which is only 6 things. And so we're going to skip that brown bear because the brown bear is the omnivore. It's not a carnivore. So you can leave number 7 blank here. Another term for herbivore is primary consumer. Primary consumer is another term for herbivore. So then you're going to list all the secondary consumers. So now we got to count arrows. So we start at the plant, and that's 1 arrow, so the pica is a primary consumer. And then we go 1 more arrow to the Arctic foxes, so the Arctic foxes is a secondary consumer. So Arctic fox. Okay, so now do that again. Count 2 arrows up from a plant. So grass to musk ox is primary, musk ox to Arctic wolf is secondary. So Arctic wolf is a secondary consumer. Now let's do it again. So grass to caribou to Arctic wolf, which we already have. So then grass to lemmings to brown bear. So brown bear would be one. And then we could go caribou moss. No, that just goes to caribou. So lichen to lemmings to snowy owl. So that would make snowy owl a secondary consumer. And then lichen to Arctic hare is primary. Arctic hare to kittiwake is secondary. So kittiwake here, which looks like a seagull, is a secondary consumer. Now for tertiary consumer, you go 3 lines. So liverwort to pika is primary. Pika to Arctic fox is secondary. Arctic fox to Arctic wolf is tertiary. So 3 arrows up. Okay, let's do another one. So liverwort to pika is primary. Pika to Arctic fox is secondary. Arctic fox to polar bear is tertiary. So the polar bear is a tertiary consumer. Okay, I'll do one more and then leave the other one for you. So liverwort to pika, primary. Pika to Arctic fox, secondary. Arctic fox to kittiwake is tertiary. So kittiwake is a tertiary consumer. So you got to count up 3 arrows from the bottom. And wherever you land, that's the animal that goes here. So find the other 2. And then quaternary consumer is 4 arrows from the bottom. So if we go liverwort to pika, that's 1. Pika to Arctic fox is secondary. Arctic fox to polar bear is tertiary. Polar bear to man is quaternary. So man is the quaternary consumer here in this food web. Quaternary consumers tend to be fairly rare because, like you learned earlier, the higher you go up, the less energy there is available because a lot of it gets lost as heat. So there have to be a lot of these plants at the bottom in order to support those herbivores, and then in order to support carnivores, and then even higher carnivores. So getting to a tertiary level carnivore is pretty difficult to do because there's very little energy left. So it can't support a whole lot of men in the area because otherwise they would starve to death and the animals would die. So decomposers are listed here on the side, bacteria and fungi, and they just kind of do a bracket like, hey, this eats everything eventually when it dies. And then when would a decomposer eat a bear or a fox? After it's dead. So after it's dead, those nutrients that are locked up in that bear or fox get recycled and get returned back to the soil where they get taken up again by plants. So for here, you're going to kind of do the same thing. So I'll leave you to do this on your own. Who are the producers? Now this one's a little bit tricky because a lot of these things are dead. So dead animals is not a producer. Dead leaves is not a producer. A rotting log is not a producer. The only producer here is the maple tree leaves. Even though these don't have any arrows pointing to them, they're dead. So they're not producing anything when they're dead. So the only producer is the maple tree leaves. And then all the decomposers, well, those are things that eat dead things. So bracket fungus, bacteria, puffball, pill bugs, insect larvae, these are all decomposers that eat dead things. So if you eat a dead thing, you're a decomposer. And then herbivores, so what eats the maple tree leaves, what eats the thing that eats the maple tree leaves, that's a secondary consumer, etc. So you're going to fill that out. Then here you get to draw. So you're doing a local food web, and so you need 2 producers, 3 primary consumers, 2 secondary consumers, and 2 decomposers, and you're going to add them to this box here. And you don't have to, so you're not going to draw them. You can insert using like the Google image tool. So let me show you. So let's say, go to add media, click on Google image search. So what's a local plant that we have here that animals eat? And so I'm just going to go with grass because that's pretty universal and every place has that. Or we could also, let's do carrots because we got a lot of carrots. And so I'm going to insert a picture of carrots and drop that in here, put it wherever. obviously make it like a lot smaller since we got to fit a bunch more things in here. So I got some carrots. Okay, then I'm going to get my drawing tool and I'm going to draw an arrow to something in the area that eats carrots. And so I'm going to go to my Google image tool here, and something we have are field mice. So I'm going to get me a field mouse. I'm going to put that in here, and I'm going to make it a lot smaller. Okay, so now I got a primary consumer, and so I'm going to need to add one more plant. I need to add 2 more primary consumers, so other things that eat carrots or whatever the other plant is. And then you need secondary consumers, so what would I say do we have in the area that eats mice? And so I would say that we have owls. We have lots of those burrowing owls, which are, let's see if we can get an actual picture of burrowing. So we have these owls here. And they live in like the sides of canals. Cannot insert image because it's corrupted. Let's try again. Burrowing owl. Let's go for you. Okay. So then I would put this in here, shrink it down, and this is a secondary consumer. So again, I would draw an arrow here. And then it would be good if you could label, so you can either write by hand or use a text box. So label carrot, and this is a field mouse. And then this is a burrowing owl. Alright, so then you're just going to keep building your food web like that. So I need another producer, I need 2 more primary consumers, I need 1 more secondary consumer, and then I need decomposers to add. And then I can do, since it's a food web, I can do multiple animals off of these carrots. So if you label something else, so like for an example, we have rabbits that are wild in the area, so you could add carrots, could also go to rabbits. And then you could also connect your rabbits to your burrowing owl, because burrowing owls would also eat these small little rabbits that we have. So connect everything together and make sure you meet the characteristics here, and you're building a local food web. Make sure you label everything. So what are your 2 producers, what are your 3 primary consumers, what are your 2 secondary consumers, and what decomposers did you use? You can add decomposers like they did up here. So see how they put bacteria and fungi just as like a bracket? You could do that, just like draw a bracket on the side and be like, hey, everything here gets eaten by bacteria and fungi, and you can add a picture of them here. So then for this worksheet here, you are finding a food chain that consists of only a producer, a primary consumer, and a secondary consumer. So we have to kind of hunt through and find the right answer. So we have trees to beaver to mountain lion. There's one there, so let me get a text box. So trees, and then draw your arrow going into the beaver, and then an arrow going into the mountain lion. So this is producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer. Okay, that's an example there. I'm sure there's others in here, but that's just one example. So identify a food chain that has a producer, a primary consumer, a secondary consumer, and a tertiary consumer. So you can do that yourself. I'm sure you can. You got to go through 4, so starting at a plant and then going forward 4 organisms. Find some herbivores, carnivores. We did this before, so you should be able to do that. Add a decomposer to the food web. What do arrows indicate about energy? And then you want to complete the table. So list all the producers, list all the primary consumers, list all the secondary consumers, and list all the tertiary consumers. When it comes to consumers, organisms can occupy multiple trophic levels. So grass can go to a grasshopper, which would make this a primary consumer, and then to a frog, this is a secondary consumer. Let me find somebody that has 2 arrows. 2 Okay, hawk, nope. Do all of these exist on just one level? I guess that makes that easier. So it looks like nobody is on multiple levels here. Everyone, so like the snake here, it would be on primary, secondary, tertiary through this set of arrows. And then over here, if I went this way, primary, secondary, tertiary. So nobody, and maybe they did that intentionally. Oh, here's one. So grass to mouse to owl. This makes the owl a secondary consumer. But if I go grass to grasshopper, that's primary, grasshopper to frog, that's secondary, frog to owl, that's tertiary. So the owl you would list in 2 places because it's acting as both a secondary consumer when it eats the mouse and also a tertiary consumer when it eats the frog. So sometimes that happens where organisms are occupying multiple trophic levels, so you need to list them in 2 places. And then this is just food chains, so that's pretty easy. Who's the producer, who's a primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Here you are drawing your own food web using these food chains. So start with grass, who eats the grass, who eats the grasshopper, who eats the sparrow, snake, frog. You're going to draw that out here. So take these food chains and combine them together into one food web. And then this last page. So one of the things that you can do with a food web or food chain is you can make an energy pyramid. So here on the bottom it would say acorn. Okay, the producers go at the bottom, and notice how the bottom of the pyramid is the largest part of the pyramid. And then the next part here is squirrel. Oops. Q-U-I-R-R-E-L. So the squirrel would go here, and it's just saying the squirrels eat the acorns. And then up here the next one would be crow. And then this last one here, I'm not going to be able to fit it all in, C-O-Y-O-T-E, for the coyote. So this would go here at the top. Maybe I'll just put this here and draw an arrow. Okay, so the coyote goes up here. So this is this food chain right here, just put into a pyramid. Now the thing is energy. So if 1,000 kilocalories are available at the first trophic level, then right here we would write 1,000. What that means is there's 1,000 like calories of acorns available in this ecosystem. Now, 90% of that leaves the environment. It gets lost as heat. And so 90% of that just radiates out and it gets lost. So then this only leaves 100. We just take off a 0 each time you go up. So we had 3 zeros, now we just have 2. So now there can only be 100 calories of squirrels available in this ecosystem. Otherwise the ecosystem would collapse. Now we take off a 0, we lose again 90% of that as heat kind of radiates outward into the environment. Take off a 0 off of 100, and this leaves us with 10. For the third, and then 90% of that is going to radiate out as heat, get lost to the environment, okay, from the crows. And so how many kilocalories are available for the tertiary consumer? Well, we take off a 0, so the answer is 1. So there's just 1 kilocalorie left. Starting with 1,000 calories at the bottom, we're down to just 1 at the top. And so as energy moves through this pyramid, a lot of it is lost. And so it says fill in the organisms. We did that, and energy amounts on the pyramid to the right. So we did that. So this is what you're doing on this page. Starting at how much you have at the bottom, and then taking off a 0 or taking off a decimal place each time you move up the pyramid, because you subtract out 90% and you leave behind only 10%. So 1 is 10% of 10. And it'd be good if you knew how to do percents, because this is how you can do like tips and stuff. So just knowing that you subtract a decimal place is how you do 10% of something. All right, and that's it for that assignment.